Hey, good afternoon. Welcome to the show. I'm John F. Gately. It's a beautiful, sunny Thursday afternoon in beautiful downtown Plymouth, America's hometown here in Massachusetts. And the Rachel Rollins story continues. It continues, kind of escalates. There's going to be some collateral damage coming up. And we're going to talk about Ricardo Arroyo and a law professor at Northeastern University who seems to have been suspended from WGBH as the legal analyst. But before we're also going to get into Dan Kennedy and his covering for how the mainstream media covered this story. We're going to get into that as well. But before we do that, the video of Mayor Wu, trying to dodge reporter questions at the State House yesterday as this story was breaking is priceless. Now, the audio is not that good. This is in a room that's brick and very tall ceilings. The acoustics are horrific, but the look in her eyes is all you have to see. It's just priceless. So here we go. She's being asked about the whole Rachel Rollins thing. Just give it a second for it to queue up here. Go ahead, computer. You can do it. Oh, see, I had this all queued up perfectly, and now it doesn't want to do it. Let me try that again. Sorry, it is a live show. There we go.
Are you disappointed in the way this is turned out?
Acoustic's a little tough.
I haven't had a chance to.
Haven't had a chance.
What has been?
But the fact that she's resigned, she'll be resigning and leaving office on Friday after a very short tenure. She broke barriers to get there, and now a year and a half later, she's gone.
I've known her to be a strong leader in our city on many issues, and this has been quite a surprise.
Mayor, did you have any indication at all that Rollins may have been influencing the DA's race? Have you had any indication about it?
Okay, I haven't been briefed. And
Dodges that question. Okay, which one? Do I leave here? How do I get out of this room? Dodges the question about whether she knew Rollins was influencing election interference with the DA's race.
Sorry, excuse me.
Okay,
Sorry.
bye.
Okay, bye. That part's the best part. At the very end, she's like, okay, bye. Sorry, the audio on that wasn't the best, but if you can see it on Twitter, again, it's definitely worth the watch. Very, very, very entertaining, that little clip by Wu. Now, Aaron Murphy, the citywide councilor, thinks Arroyo should consider resigning from Boston City Council in the wake of the Rollins scandal. I don't know anyone who thinks what he did was okay. And what he did, just to be perfectly clear, is he encouraged a sitting U.S. attorney general, U.S. attorney, to launch an investigation against his political opponent in an active political campaign, the primary from last year. That's exactly what he did. Boston City Council believes that Ricardo Arroyo should consider resigning. Have some backbone. Just call for him to resign, not call for him to consider to resign. Actually, call for him to resign. After two scathing federal reports documented Rollins' alleged attempt to meddle in last year's Suffolk County District Attorney race on his behalf. Blah, 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 blah. On the eve of the report, Boston Globe detailing prior sexual allegations made against him when he was a teenager. Arroyo messaged Rollins that the announcement of the investigation to Hayden would be the best thing that I can have happen at this moment. Understood, Rollins said. Keep fighting and campaigning. I'm working on something. Now, there has been legitimate question is how did that original story about Arroyo and his alleged sexual proclivities, how did that drop? That's a good question. That's the legitimate question. Where did that story come from? Nobody has any information on that. No one's talking. Certainly the reporters aren't talking. But Arroyo is talking. And in his statement that he released, let's bring this up here, I was never contacted or notified about the Rollins investigations by the Inspector General or Special Counsel. I have reviewed the reports released by the respective offices, and neither of those reports allege any wrongdoing on my part. Now, when he uses the term wrongdoing, he clearly means from a criminal point of view, because in no other way, shape, or form could you say that this was ethical. This was definitely unethical on his part. It may not have been illegal. I guess we'll find that out later. But it was definitely unethical. And I think if it's unethical, it's wrongdoing, right? My focus remains on the district. Yep, you go do that. Represent your district. Sure. Now, Erin Murphy's letter is a little bit more detailed. Let's see if we can bring that up. Here we go. A little tough to read. It's lengthy. I'm beyond disappointed to read that my colleague, who eagerly welcomed Rollins' election tampering in order to advance his campaign for DA. As an attorney and current representative of Suffolk County residents in District 5, Arroyo quite simply should have known better. Bingo! Erin Murphy, yes. This was evidenced and demonstrated by the initiation of encrypted messaging system. See, Arroyo was trying to be so secret about this, he actually switched from basic text messages to encrypted messages. And willful engagement in diversion of our democratic process. He must face swift and appropriate consequences. Right? If it's wrong for Trump to do it, if it's wrong for Clinton to do it, which she was in coordination with the FBI, then it's wrong for Arroyo to do it. And Rollins, right? If you're against election interference, then you should definitely, absolutely, positively be against this. But so many of the far left is no. They just keep on saying, well, if Arroyo did this wrong, then Hayden must have done something. But there's no proof that Hayden did anything wrong. Come up with some proof, and then we can talk about it. Bringing back up a statement from Murphy. Boston City Council was just reprimanded by a federal judge for its treatment of constituents' voting rights. That's right. You know, I wondered on Twitter today whether or not the reason why most of the Boston City Council is not speaking out for Ricardo's immediate resignation is that maybe he has some type of key role, or they want his vote in the redistricting. Now, it seems as if that's like the biggest thing before the council right now. And maybe, you know, in some way he has a role in that, and they don't want to annoy him because they need his vote or support one way or the other. The other reason, and I got a response on Twitter about this, thank you very much. The other possibility is that the reason why Mayor Wu, especially Mayor Wu, has not called for his resignation, and subsequently other Boston City councilors, is that Arroyo was probably texting Wu. This is the theory that I was tweeted back at me. It's a pretty good theory that Arroyo was also getting campaign advice from Wu. And of course, Arroyo probably has those text messages, encrypted or otherwise. And therefore, Wu's not calling for his resignation, because if she was to do that, Arroyo might dump the text messages, right? And we could find out more about how Wu may have been coordinating with Rollins and Arroyo, all three of them. That's distinctly possible, you know, now that I think about it more. So maybe Wu's not saying anything because she doesn't want to go down with Arroyo, because it's a speculative question. But what if Wu was coordinating with Rollins and Arroyo together, or either, you know, together as a triangle, or, you know, in some way that they were all working on this together? It's very possible. So when you look at this letter here, see anything else? Erin Murphy's taking the high road here. Good for her. In one text to Arroyo, Rollins allegedly wrote, "No mercy, finish him." In another, he said, "Will regret the day he did this to you. Watch." So all credit to Erin Murphy for having the credibility to actually call out one of your own city councilors, which I'm sure is not a very popular thing. But when it comes to election interference, how can you be against Trump or Clinton interference, but for this, but silent on this? Unless Arroyo has some compromising material on you. Right, Michelle? All right, so let's go to our next story here. If we bring it up on the page here we go. Sorry about that. When you look at the May 17th article, Rachel Rollins, champion of criminal justice reform, was undone by her political activity, and you scroll all the way to the bottom, you'll find a note by WGBH. After learning that he is referenced in a Department of Justice report on the U.S. Attorney General, Rachel Rollins, GBH has suspended Daniel Medved, I think that's how you pronounce his name, from his role as an on-air legal analyst pending further review. High ethical standards and credibility are central to our work, and nothing is more important to us than our audience's trust. Nothing is more important to GBH than the audience trust. That's why we buried the suspension at the bottom of this story in a footnote. Nothing is more important than our audience's trust. That's why we buried Daniel Medved's suspension in a footnote at the bottom of the page. Sure, GBH. Nothing's more important. Yeah, sure. Now, when you look at this, you're like, well, what was he involved in? Well, if you go over to the, I'm going to bring this up here, and go to page 29 of the IG report, you're going to find that on August 16th and 17th, Rollins receives a letter from a law school professor calling for a federal investigation into Hayden. And Rollins consults with the DOJ about her recusal from such an investigation. Now, allegedly, this law professor is Daniel Medved, and that is confirmed by the note at the bottom of this GBH article, which just was updated today. So basically, Medved is writing a letter to Rollins, for whom he is compatico with, right? And he's writing a letter over to Rollins and saying, you should launch an investigation into Hayden, who is Medved's political opponent. He doesn't like Hayden. He's with Arroyo. Meanwhile, Medved is offering, contemporaneously with, he's offering political analysis, legal analysis, on WGBH. Here he is here on August 30th. This would be just like less than 2 weeks after the letter was sent. He's offering, with Jeremy Siegel, he's the host, I believe, a legal analysis as to the veracity of the complaints against Mr. Arroyo and the potential complaint against Mr. Haywood. So what he doesn't say, what he doesn't disclose, is he's actually, Professor Medved is actually an active participant behind the scenes in trying to launch an investigation against one of the candidates. Yeah, I mean, you can't make this up. He's actively asking the U.S. attorney to launch an investigation against Kevin Hayden. Meanwhile, he's the objective legal analyst over at GBH. That's a conflict, ladies and gentlemen, especially if you don't disclose it, which he didn't. So I'm not going to say all credit to GBH, but a teeny bit of credit for actually suspending him. And, of course, allegedly, he's not named in the DOJ report from the inspector, but it's acknowledged through the GBH website itself. Because shame on GBH for kind of sweeping this suspension under the rug. But you really shouldn't be surprised, because everything about this is somehow about covering your tracks. Remember that Rachel Rollins is, up until just the other day, was a darling of the Boston media elites and political elites. They put her here. They took the whole George Floyd thing and made her U.S. attorney. She got elected Suffolk DA in 2018. It was completely based upon the color of her skin and not necessarily her qualifications. They bought into everything she said. Supported by Monica Cannon Grant, pro rock thrower. Literally, the woman's Twitter handle is pro rock thrower. I don't know about you, but if your Twitter handle is pro rock thrower, then maybe you have some ethical issues. I don't know. And of course, Monica Cannon Grant, she's in deep trouble with the feds. Now, theoretically, Rollins has recused herself from that investigation. Let's hope that she actually did in full. Meanwhile, over at Media Nation, Dan Kennedy, the mainstream media apologist, is explaining why the press should not have blown the whistle on Rachel Rollins. You see, the big question here is when the reporter gets the phone call or the text message and says, hey, I'm Rachel Rollins, and I have some dirt on Kevin Hayden. I want you to know this information. You can go, do with it as you will. The first thing the reporter should have said is that, wait a second, you're the sitting U.S. attorney. You shouldn't be giving me information about. I can't promise you anonymity because the bigger story here is that you're trying to interfere in the election. But here's what Dan Kennedy had to say. I sent a tweet out about this, and apparently I'm now, quote, several people may have raised questions as to why the local press didn't blow the whistle on U.S. Attorney Rollins, characterizing her attempts to influence the race. Okay, Dan's going to tell us why. Rollins leaked a broken faucet. Yeah, she did leak like a broken. You got that right, Dan. The report makes clear that there was a serious ethical violation, that the possibility landed her in legal trouble. Isn't that a story in and of itself? Yes, it is, Dan. Well, now, the relationship between journalists and sources is not often pretty, and this one gives us an inside look. All sources have all sorts of motives, sometimes less than pure. True. Reporters want the story, generally don't worry about whether their sources are doing the right thing. It doesn't really matter whether the source is doing the right thing, Dan, although that should matter. I mean, isn't that the ultimate thing, is whether or not public officials are doing the right thing? She's not some crack dealer on the corner, Dan. She's the U.S. attorney, and she's clearly doing something that's wrong. That should matter at the very beginning of the journalistic interaction. These sorts of back-channel communications, according to Bruce Moll and Michael Jonas, are commonplace in the world of political journalism, where reporters and political figures use each other for their own, but rarely do the exchanges come to light. So there's two things about this article that Dan's got wrong. The number one thing is that Dan says there's no way that the reporters could have known the full extent of Rollins' wrongdoing. The problem with that statement, Dan, is that it's an admission that they did know some extent of her wrongdoing, right? Right? So if you're saying, well, they didn't know everything, well, of course they didn't know everything, but they did know that her contacting them to influence an election right off the bat, any reporter worth their salt, any reporter worth their salt in this town has got to know right off the bat that that was wrong. And then Dan goes on to say that he goes into this case about a situation where the reporter verbally promised, this Cohen case, verbally promised anonymity, keep the source secret. Well, in these text messages, the reporters may or may not have made that type of promise. But if they did, that was wrong on the reporter's behalf. That was wrong on the behalf. And I don't know if they actually did that. I mean, some of these exchanges are not specific, not that specific about whether there's a conflict, whether there's a promise of anonymity, which I can't even pronounce this afternoon. Forgive me. But right off the bat, if you get this contact from the U.S. attorney, this is not like, hey, we're going to go arrest somebody tomorrow that everybody knows. You want to come along. It's not CNN going to what's his name's house down in Florida there. That's not this. This is, how do I influence an election to succeed me as just Suffolk District County attorney? The reporter immediately is going to say, the bigger story is that I just got a call from Rachel Rollins, and she's trying to investigate never offer confidentiality in that case. When someone who's contacting you is clearly violating at least the ethics, if not the law. So nice try, Dan. They should have never offered the confidentiality to the source, ever. And therefore, they wouldn't be covered by this Cohen case that you're mentioning here, which has the doctrine of promissory estoppel that you threw in here. Is a good reference, but you went too far because, first off, you admitted that they may not have known their full extent of Rachel Rollins' wrongdoing. They did know some extent. Your admission is in there. And since they knew some extent, they should have never promised confidentiality for such a high-level government official. This is not some staffer, walking down the hallway at City Hall or at the State House. This is the U.S. attorney who should be held to the highest level of ethical standard. And isn't it the job of the media to hold her to that standard rather than work with her towards her political goals? All right, so I'm John F. Gately, broadcasting to you from beautiful Plymouth, America's hometown in Massachusetts. Have a great day.